Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Before we begin, please hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and you can also join my Patreon. We have a big goal there. I will talk about that at the end of the video. I've got two podcasts. This one is Dining with Death. This is an archival series. I don't make new episodes for this one. It is simply the audio taken from the video episodes here on YouTube before I rebranded the channel. This is my new podcast. This is my baby, Dark Hearts. I release new episodes every Monday and Wednesday, and there will be podcast exclusives here that you cannot hear anywhere else. The longer I've done this, the longer I've created true crime content, the more honest I've had to be with myself about something. It has changed me. In fact, I know that a lot of you are aware there are some very big true crime content creators that have stopped, have quit, some of them pretty recently, because this does take a toll on you. It affects you. Not only is the subject matter very dark, but people on social media are just awful. On top of that, the algorithms are impossible. It's a grind. It's really frustrating to try to turn out quality content that, not that many people see, despite what you do. But I think more than anything, it has just changed the way I feel about people that do bad things. Before I started doing this about 4.5 years ago, I would see an awful crime, or I would hear about a terrible story, and I would just think, oh my gosh, that is so awful. That is terrible. I feel terrible for the victims. And now I hear about these terrible stories, and sometimes the first thing I think is, I'd like to track that piece of shit down, cut off his balls, and shove him down his throat. It's just the truth. I wish I was kidding. I do. I have grown such a hatred for people that do bad things that I'm kind of like, I gotta chill. I gotta take a step back. I don't want this to make me angry and bitter. I've been robbed 3 times. Every time I get robbed, it is just infuriating. Now imagine how victims of crime feel when somebody takes the life of someone they love. Not their stuff, somebody's life. I have to admit to myself, doing this has changed me. And today's story is a perfect example of why. This is an old story that has recently come back into the news because it just had its 30th, I hate using the word anniversary, it's been 30 years since it happened. This is the story of the Below murders. I'm your host, Stacey Lee. Let's begin.
Attention, Bart to your rescue. Checking for traffic. We have 1033 traffic. 1033 traffic at Belows and Windsor. Subject has been shot. Checking for traffic. 1033 traffic.
What you just heard was a very small clip of a police scanner recording taken on June 6, 1993. This crime took place in Windsor, North Carolina. That audio is awful, I know, and it's hard to understand anything that's being said there. But dispatch is communicating with officers who have just come upon the scene of a massacre. There was a little grocery store in Bertie County. It's not there anymore. The building still stands, but the store is long gone. Back in 1993, it was called Below. The store closed at 6 o'clock, and the manager, a cashier, and the cleaning crew were there to start their evening duties. Suddenly, a man appeared in the store holding a gun. He first came upon the manager and the cashier, and they froze and stared at him. The man was an average height, well-built black man, between 28 and 35 years old, with shortly cropped hair like a military-style haircut. He also had a scar on the bridge of his nose that was very prominent. The man holding the gun told the manager and the cashier, "I'm a former cop, and I've got nothing to lose." 47-year-old store manager Grover Cecil, who went by Bud, and 36-year-old cashier Joyce Reason were at the front of the store closing out. 48-year-old Johnny Rankins, 40-year-old Sylvester Welch, 48-year-old Thomas Hardy, and his brother Jasper had just arrived at the store. The 4 men were the cleaning crew, the evening cleaning crew, and they had just arrived to do their duties to get the store all cleaned and prepared for the next day's opening. The store had been cleared out and locked, and that's when Bud, the manager, realized this person hid somewhere in the store and waited for them to clear the store out and lock the doors. I mean, that's really creepy to think about the fact that somebody's hiding and waiting for their moment. They'd missed this guy, they had locked up the store, and they had locked him inside with them. So Bud and Joyce see the assailant, but the cleaning crew is in the back of the store and they did not. The assailant first approached Joyce and he said, "Get your manager." Can you imagine how startled she was to turn around and see this guy pointing a gun at her? Bud had only been the store manager for about 8 months. He was pretty close by, so Joyce just kind of said his name. She didn't have to shout or anything to get his attention. Bud saw the man and he, stood in stunned silence. The man waved his gun and motioned for Joyce and Bud to stand together. He demanded that Bud open all the store registers and that he open the safe. Bud did exactly as he was told, hoping that the man would take the money and leave. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. The man gathered all the cash from the registers and from the safe. It totaled around $3,000. That's about $6,500 in today's money. Bud and Joyce were still hopeful that the man would just take the money and go. But their hearts sank as the man began to bark orders at them. First, he forced Bud and Joyce to the very farthest back corner of the store. Then the man told Bud to call the cleaning crew to come to the same aisle. Imagine these men's reaction. They hear their manager's voice calling them to come, and when they get there, instead there's a guy pointing a gun at them. They probably walked over there thinking, he's got some task he wants us to complete, and instead, So now the assailant had all 6 employees at the store herded into a corner, and he kind of pushed them back into the butcher's room. There was a meat counter, and behind that was the butcher's room. The man told Bud to tie everyone up. So Bud did as he was told. He got some duct tape and some dog leashes off of the shelf. And then he went from person to person and he tied up Joyce and the 4 men on the cleaning crew. Then the gunman told Bud, "Tie yourself up." He sat and watched as Bud took duct tape and bound himself, bound his hands together. As Bud was tying everybody up, the gunman was talking. He said that he'd recently lost his job. He said there was a drug deal that had gone wrong. He said that he had been a cop and things had gone bad. And then he kept repeating over and over, "I got nothing to lose." The man then made everybody get down on the ground and did something I find to be very strange. He made them stack themselves into piles. So there's 6 people and he makes 3 piles, so there's 3 people on the bottom, 3 people on the top. As these people lay on the floor, bound and helpless, the man just started shooting at them. Joyce was killed instantly, and so was Bud. Johnny was also shot and killed. Sylvester was also wounded. We will probably never know if it was by luck or by design, but the 2 brothers, Thomas and Jasper, were not hit. The killer raised his arm again and went to shoot, but his gun jammed. With his gun not working, the killer then went about rearranging the bodies. He took them out of the piles that they were in and laid them down in a single file line on the floor and put them face down. The store floor was now beginning to There were pools of blood forming. The killer changed his mind and he wanted everybody to roll over. So he rolled the dead people over, and then he rolled the wounded person over, and then the 2 brothers. So now everybody's facing up. The killer turned his attention to the 2 brothers, Thomas and Jasper, and he started grilling them on whether or not they could identify him to the police. Thomas said, "No, I wouldn't know how to identify you. You look like everybody else to me. I'm not going to tell the cops anything." All of a sudden, the killer turned and stormed out of the butcher room, and he came back holding a knife. It was just a knife that he had taken off the store shelves, a knife that was being sold at the store. He held the knife to Jasper, and he said, "Are you going to tell the cops?" Jasper said, "No, I wouldn't know where to begin. You just look like another guy to me." The killer replied to Jasper, "I don't believe you." And then he slashed his throat. After that, he went to Thomas, rolled him back over onto his stomach, and began stabbing him in the back. He stabbed Thomas repeatedly until the knife blade broke off. So this guy now had a jammed gun and a broken knife. He turned his attention to Jasper, looked over at him, and said, "I'm going to let you live, big man." And with that, this monster turned on his heels and walked out of the store. He was carrying the money in a canvas bag. He'd left 3 people dead and 3 people gravely injured. When the killer left, like I said, he shoved all of the money into a cloth shopping bag, and he also took the store keys. The 3 employees that were still alive waited in silence for a few minutes. And then Sylvester, he was gravely injured, but this is so sad. He was able to free himself because he was so bloody that the tape was not sticky anymore. The blood had ruined the adhesive on the tape. So he was able to take his bloody hands and slip them out of the duct tape. He crawled over to the phone. Here you can see a trail of blood on the floor. This is where this poor man crawled across the floor. He reached up and grabbed the phone off its receiver and he called the police. The police scanner audio that I played you at the beginning of the episode is what happens when they get the call. The cops arrived almost immediately. They found Bud, Joyce, and Johnny dead. They had been shot in the head, they had been shot in the back, they had been stabbed. Even Sylvester had been shot once in the back. Thomas had had his throat slashed and he had been stabbed multiple times, but he was alive. Both he and Sylvester were rushed to the hospital. Both of these men miraculously survive. So of course they interview Jasper. They take a lot of time with him. They get as many details from him as they can. The families are informed of this horrible massacre, this tragedy, and then the police begin to investigate. From the very beginning, the police knew that robbery was a motive. But then they began to theorize it might not be the only motive. If robbery was the only motive, why didn't the killer just take the cash and leave? Why would he stick around to commit such a monstrous act? It was totally and completely unnecessary to kill these people. If he was worried about being identified, he would have killed them all. As Jasper is interviewed, he tells the police all the details. The guy said he was a cop, that he'd been fired over a drug deal. He told him about the scar on the bridge of his nose, the haircut. The cops begin to be more intrigued about this killer. It almost feels like he was taking out his anger on these victims. Perhaps this killer felt the horrible actions were justified because he too had been wronged. All three of the survivors told the police that they tried to remain calm even when the gun jammed. They said the killer was demanding and he was, harsh and brusque with them, but that he wasn't yelling, he wasn't out of control, he wasn't screaming. The next question that the police have is, why would this guy stack the bodies up like that? And it's then they realize, oh my gosh, it was to save bullets. Some of the cops said, well, maybe he was trying to leave as little evidence as possible, as few shell casings as possible. But the shell casings were still there. It doesn't matter if they have 1 or 50. And that's when they figured out he just didn't have a lot of ammunition. Jasper then told the police about the knife blade breaking off in Thomas's back. But he said the killer leaned over Thomas and took the time to pull the knife blade up out of his back, and he took the blade with him. Maybe the killer was worried that he had touched the blade or that his own blood was on it. There would be evidence on it. But again, if the killer was worried about being caught, why didn't he cover his face? Why did he leave someone alive? Actually, he left 3 people alive, but he knew for sure he had left 1 alive. Almost kind of like he wanted somebody to tell what had happened. Jasper said the man was black. He was between 6 foot and 6'2". He said he was in his 30s and he thought he weighed 170 to 200 pounds. Again, he identified the nose as straight and narrow and having either a big scar across the bridge or having a really pronounced bridge. In the sketches, you can see it's almost overly exaggerated. Jasper said that the man had a medium complexion and that he had brown eyes that were slanted. The police asked Jasper, was the man carrying anything besides the gun? And he said not at first. He didn't even have an extra magazine. Word of this massacre spread through the town, as you can imagine, very quickly, and then through North Carolina and then through the country. People were shocked and sickened by the details. This was just a group of grocery store employees closing up the shop, doing their job to get their little paycheck. And this guy comes in and kills them and shoots them and stabs them. He could have walked out of the grocery store very easily, take the money and leave. And instead he did that. The crime scene was gruesome. As I showed you, there's a blood trail for where Sylvester dragged himself from where he was shot to where he called the police. There were literal pools of blood under the bodies. The police immediately canvassed the area and spoke to everyone who had been anywhere near the store during the shooting. Several witnesses said they saw a white car with 2 men in it, and it had Maryland license plates. One witness said they had seen the men sitting in a car in a parking lot near the store, and another witness said they saw the car speeding out of town. It was going north on US 17 when they saw it. And that's when the police began to believe that this killer had an accomplice who waited in the car as the killer went in, robbed the store, did what he did, and left. Before long, the little Below grocery store was swarming with media. People said the lights from the media trucks lit up the sky like daylight. There were helicopters brought in from bigger cities. This was a very big deal. By morning, there were thousands of people standing around the scene, praying and crying and holding each other. The sheriff at the time, Sheriff Hawley, said he remembers every aspect of the crime like it was yesterday. He said, "It was really bad and I will never forget any of it." Jasper gave an interview to a reporter and said the worst part of it was touching some of the other bodies and feeling the bodies move and jump as they were shot. He said he was having nightmares about it, and I'll bet he still does. The cops investigated very diligently for a week, and then a month, and then a year. Soon, 10 years had gone by, and now it's been 30. To this day, we do not know who the monster is that committed these horrible crimes. There were, however, some things that happened in subsequent years that gave some clues. About a year after the Windsor store murders, a similar attack occurred at the Below store in Hertford. The store's manager, a man named Dwayne Gilliam, who had worked at that Below since 1987, and a stock clerk were accosted one night at closing time. They were bound with duct tape and they were bound with dog leashes. It was the exact same thing that had happened in Windsor. Also, the man who accosted them had been hiding in the store when it closed. He waited until the doors were locked and then he came out from his hiding place. The man then took all the money from the registers, but that time he left the employees bound and gagged. He didn't hurt them at all. The police investigated that incident and have never found the assailant. They have no way of knowing if the two crimes are related. Shannon Cecil, Bud's daughter, was 20 years old and attending Campbell University when her father was killed. She said her brother came into the house and told her that her father would never be coming home. Shannon says to this day she still has so many questions. Why our town? Why that store? I honestly think those are the things that would drive me crazy. Like, had my loved one just not gone to work that day? Had my loved one been outside taking the garbage out? I think those are the things that would drive me crazy. Like, your life can change in the blink of an eye. When I got in my car wreck in March, for those of you that don't know, I was in a head-on collision here in town on March 11th. The combined speed of my car and the girl that hit me was almost 70 miles an hour. It was a very serious accident. And all I could think for weeks was, what were the odds of me being right there? A kid was sitting here at Wingstop to pull out. She's coming this way. He pulls right out and hits her, flips her car and spins her over to me. She crosses 5 lanes of traffic and hits me head on. And the only thing that kept going through in my mind was just like everything that had to line up absolutely perfectly for me to be in that exact spot at that exact moment. I had just picked up a giant piece of glass to put in a frame over a piece of artwork for my new house. And as soon as I left the glass store, I said to the guy, well, I hope I don't get in a car wreck and break my glass. And I got in a car wreck and broke a whole lot more than the glass. I'm still having a hard time driving. So I cannot imagine what it would be like to lose someone you love to something like this and just have those thoughts over and over and over. Just like, what if they wouldn't have gone to work that day? What if their car would have broke down and they wouldn't have made it to work? What if they were sick? I think it might drive me nuts. Wallace Perry, who became the sheriff later on, said, it's very unusual that this hasn't been solved because there really has been a lot of effort put into this. There's even a $30,000 reward for any information leading to who the killer might be. This case was featured on America's Most Wanted. It was on the North Carolina news over and over and over for years. The state of North Carolina still has a detective assigned to this case. Still, nothing. Police firmly believe that the killer has confessed his crimes to somebody, probably a woman. That's what the profilers believe. Sheriff Perry says whoever this woman is, the fact that she knows about this puts her in danger. She knows, and she probably knows she's in danger. Bill Godley, special agent in charge, told reporters, quote, I don't know of a single case in northeastern North Carolina where we have dedicated more interest and resources. The townsfolk will hold vigils from time to time and they tie yellow ribbons around the trees to remember the victims. Dwayne Gilliam, the manager from the Hertford store, will often attend those vigils. And he says, this could have been me. Says he's very grateful every day. He doesn't know why he lived and the other people didn't. Later on, Police Corporal Rodney Hoggard would say, at the time, I never would have considered anything like this happening. Another cop says he remembers hearing the call over the radio and thinking, well, we're going to be dealing with a hostage situation. Like somebody's locked themselves in this grocery store and, they're going to be holding everybody hostage. He never in his wildest dreams thought that everybody would be lined up and shot. Several of the cops told reporters that they didn't really think robbery was the only motive. They are convinced that this man came in to hurt people and kill people. Taking the money was just a sick bonus for him. Sylvester Welch, the one who freed himself and got to the phone, he also goes by Tony. He died of cancer in 2005. I did not find any information on Thomas or Jasper. I hope they're alive somewhere, and I hope they're doing the best they can.
There are so many questions and so few answers. Not a day goes by where the investigators, survivors, and the victims' families aren't reminded of these brutal murders. 20 years later, they're still seeking justice and closure.
What's wrong?
We shot. We
June 6, 1993.
5 more have been either shot or stabbed.
After having all the victims bound in duct tape and tied up in dog chains,
The investigators hope to find this killer.
It's a day that changed the small town of Windsor forever. The day of the Below murders. Now retired police chief Rodney Hoggard remembers it like it was yesterday. What happened in there?
The manager and the cashier at the Below had closed the store. A cleaning crew had come in. During that time, somebody came from inside the store. Evidently, he had hidden in the store.
The man told employees he was a police officer who had been fired, but investigators now believe that to be untrue. He took the 6 people to the back of the store, bound them with duct tape, and forced them to the floor in piles.
3 by 3, 2 on top of each other. And his intentions were to shoot through the stack, save ammo.
But he didn't save ammo. Instead, detectives believe he fired until he ran out. That's when they say the man went to the kitchen and grabbed a butcher knife, slashing one of the victim's throats and stabbing him so hard the knife broke off in his back.
He just went about it methodically, and he knew his purpose, and he did it.
The stranger walked into the darkness, leaving everyone to die. Store cashier Joyce Reason was stacked on top of cleaning crew member Tony Welch. They both had been shot, but Welch somehow mustered the strength to get up. His wife talked with us in 2006.
He said that his hands came loose because of all the blood. And he crawled out from under her to go to the front of the store. And that's when he called 911.
Welch survived the attack, but later lost his battle with cancer in 2005. 2 other people survived. One was miraculously unharmed. Store manager Bud Cecil, cashier Joyce Reason, and cleaning crew member Johnny Rankins were not so lucky. Cecil's children still remember the day police knocked on their door.
Feeling of disbelief, and you think that they made a mistake.
I wish he was coming home, and I know he's not.
There are details I'd like to forget.
Details they can't forget, especially with the killer still on the loose. There were surveillance cameras in the store, but they didn't work. After the attack, Tony Welch was able to help investigators create this sketch. Almost 20 years later, Windsor Police Lieutenant Ricky Morris has now taken over the case along with the SBI. Are you still looking into leads?
Oh yeah, constantly. We get, tips, we get leads, possible suspects, all the time. You may get 1 a year, 2 a year, you may get 5 a year. As soon as we get them, we jump on it.
Those leads have taken investigators all over the country, most recently in 2003 to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Below building is now a community college campus. Just inside the door, there's a plaque dedicated to those who died. An eerie calmness still lurks, an unsettled feeling for investigators, survivors, and families.
He ripped apart so many lives, and he just, I just would like to know why. Why would you do that? You got what you wanted. Why did you have to rip apart so many lives?
You don't realize how hard it is on the family. 20 years later, for me, is it easier? No. I'll never forget. And for me, I'll never forgive. I honestly won't. You destroyed my family.
I just retired a couple of days ago, and I guess the only regret I have is.
And why do you say it's a regret?
Couldn't solve it.
But there's still hope.
Yep.
I chose this episode because it is just such a senseless crime, and I think I'm just dealing with some anger at these kinds of criminals lately. I knew it would be a little bit of a shorter episode because there's just not a lot of information, but I do not want this story to get forgotten. We have the facts that we have, and those facts have not changed for a very long time. There have been no new leads, no new clues, and there is very little hope that this case will ever be solved. I want to send love to the surviving members of this massacre and to everyone who loves and cares about them. What you have been through is everyone's worst nightmare. We all hope that you're healing, and we all hope that you are moving on in the best way you know how. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Please hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon for a few dollars a month. You help me keep the videos coming, and you can also be part of our fundraiser. You do not have to join Patreon as a monthly patron in order to donate to the fundraiser. This is the thumbnail on my channel that will take you to the video that explains everything about the fundraiser. You can donate through Venmo, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, and you can also do super thanks here on YouTube, but just be aware that YouTube takes 30% of your donation. You can listen to the podcast if you want. There's some great stories on this one, Dining with Death. This is just the audio taken from the old video episodes that are still on my channel. You can still watch the video episodes on the playlist Dining with Death, but this is the new podcast. You'll hear some podcast exclusives here, stories you won't hear anywhere else. I release new episodes of Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee every Monday and Wednesday, and both of the podcasts are on Apple and Spotify. I hope you're hanging in there. I think we are living in some sort of weird Twilight Zone hellscape right now, and I know everybody's really worried about our future. Whatever your views are, things just kind of suck right now, don't they? And you know what? It's okay to say that. It's okay to say that. Please take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. We need it now more than ever. Stay safe, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Bye.